Today we're going to talk about the base, build, and peak phases of training. Whether you're a single sport athlete or a triathlete, you can use this sort of structure to create a periodized program, meaning you're breaking your training up into specific periods. So base training is sort of like it sounds. It's establishing the foundation of your training, of your physical ability. And if you need a super small summary, it's meant to be endurance training or aerobic training. It's also, in theory, going to be the highest volume piece of your training. We'll talk about the applicability of that at the end of the video. The build phase of training is going to include more high intensity, a little less volume, and a lot more race specific workouts. So that could be, you're training for a 5K, it would be 5K focused workouts. If you're training for an Ironman or half Ironman, it's going to be workouts geared towards that. The peak phase is now less volume and maybe even a little more time at race intensity. Um, One thing I want to make clear is that in the build phase, you could be doing over intensity. In the peak phase, you're going to really dial it into a lot of just race specific intensity with some caveats. After the peak phase, you have a taper, which could be 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how much of a taper you need and what you're training for. And then you'll have your race phase, which is going to be a week or two, approaching your actual race. So, things to know about all this. Number one, if you're inconsistent, this just isn't going to work. You need to be consistent week in and week out, because if you train for 2 weeks and then take a week off, you're going to detrain too much and really invalidate the whole program. Number two, and this one is key to a lot of working athletes, if you cannot make the time, and this is totally understandable, but if you cannot make the time to train more than about 10 to 12 hours per week, then you want to disregard the volume aspect of this. Because if you were to try to do a base build peak with only 10 hours of training, you'd be at like 10 hours for base, 8 or 9 hours for build, 7 to 8 for peak. The problem with that from a triathlon standpoint is that's really not enough time to improve as much as you really should. So if that's the case for you, if you're like a 9 to 10 hour athlete, what I would recommend is keeping your total training time roughly the same and using the base phase to do more aerobic work, the build phase to include higher intensity and race specific, the peak phase to really dial it into race intensity, but keep your training right around the same amount of time, 9 to 10 hours. That way you're getting the most most out of your training that you can with the time that you have available. In an ideal situation, if you have a lot of time in your hands, you can make the time work. Then in your base phase of training, this is for Ironman athletes, I'm gonna point out, you might be doing 20 to 25 hours of total training per week. For the build phase, you might be down to 15 or 20 hours of training, and the peak phase could be moving into the 10 to 15 hour range. Taper and race, you're going to drop off quite a bit. It's all a little individual there. So that's what you really need to know about base, build, and peak. That's it. Thanks.